Hi guys, see you again on the Shonia Studio channel. This time I want to tell a story about a talk show that ends in murder. How the full story? Watch this video until it's finished. Asking permission to broadcast an event is very urgent. Not only to avoid events that harm a party later on, but the importance of maintaining the reputation of some people. That's why sometimes when we discuss existing cases, we also like to be anxious, if without permission. In my experience, the video was even deleted, at the request of the parties, and related relatives as well. A reality show or talk show, sometimes the audience wants a surprise for the participants, and guest stars who appear. When in reality, guests or participants who really want to be surprised are not happy, and it can end tragically. This is what happened on a talk show, Jenny Jones Show, and recording on March 6, 1995, was quite long, so this event was not a live broadcast, where the participants gave surprises to other participants, but turned out to be a tragic ending, because they felt humiliated. At the event 3 days later there was decay, which is quite tragic between them, which in the end the suspect blames the event crew. Before we continue, to support this channel first, by pressing the subscribe button and also turning on the notification, so that next time, if for example I upload the latest video about something fun, you will be the first to know. In the era of 1991 to 2003, the Jenny Jones Show was quite famous, America's favorite talk show program such as the Oprah program, which usually did not only guest stars from the artist community, but from the audience, according to the theme discussed, and certainly the program was hosted by Jenny Jones herself. Jenny Jones is a stand-up comedian, presenter, and singer. She has even published several biographies. Scott Bernard Ameger is a man born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, January 26, 1963. He is a hard worker as well as a freelancer, who usually helps his friends to sell online. In addition, sometimes he helps in an event organizer. Scott also admits to being a gay person, and many people already know that. He is openly gay, but he lives in his car house, in the Lake Orion area of Michigan, where it is said that Scott is used to living far from his family, with independence that is always lived. Some informed that there was a mismatch between sports and his father, who could not accept him as a gay man. Here in Lake Orion, Michigan, Scott lives well alone with his neighbors, an area that some find very peaceful. This is where he knows a young man named Jonathan Schmitz, as a neighbor who he thinks is very handsome. Jonathan is 7 years younger than Scott. Hard worker as well as a freelancer, who usually helps his friends to sell online. In addition, sometimes he helps in an event organizer. Scott also admits to being a gay person, and many people already know that. He is openly gay, but he lives in his car house, in the Lake Orion area of Michigan, where it is said that Scott is used to living far from his family, with independence that is always lived. Some informed that there was a mismatch between sports and his father, who could not accept him as a gay man. Here in Lake Orion, Michigan, Scott lives well alone with his neighbors, an area that some find very peaceful. This is where he knows a young man named Jonathan Schmitz, as a neighbor who he thinks is very handsome. Jonathan is 7 years younger than Scott. And Jonathan is a very nice young man. Scott often asks Jonathan for help to make repairs to his car house, and Jonathan always helps him. This has always made Scott like Jonathan even more. And what is certain is that Jonathan is a heterogeneous man, and he already has a girlfriend, whom he has been dating since 1992. One day Scott Amador volunteered to be one of the guest stars or participants for the Jenny Jones Show, where the theme at that time was, "When Your Secret Crush is the Same Sex." Scott Amador is joined by another neighbor named Donna, who guest stars, and will surprise Jonathan Schmitz, where Scott will confess on the talk show that he has been a secret admirer of Jonathan, who incidentally is his own neighbor. Jonathan, who was initially contacted by the show's crew, thought he would be reunited with his female admirer. But at that time the television crew said it was still a secret, and said it could be a woman or a man, who was Jonathan's secret admirer. Although Jonathan seems to have gotten the code, that the secret admirer that will appear is a woman. The day of filming on March 6, 1995 arrived, where initially Scott and Donna were the parties to chat with Jenny Jones, while Jonathan was still behind the stage, and deliberately so as not to overhear the conversation on stage. In keeping with the theme of this secret same-sex crush, Scott began to tell how he first met Jonathan as his neighbor. Then how Jonathan began to attract his attention, even filling Scott's sexual fantasies every night. Actually, what Scott said was like getting encouragement from the host Jenny Jones. Jenny kept asking what kind of fantasy, and what kind of desire, popped into Scott's head every time he thought of Jonathan. At that time Scott was 32 years old, and was unemployed, while Jonathan was 25 years old. Jonathan seemed surprised to see Scott and Donna already on stage, which incidentally were both neighbors and friends of Jonathan. And Jonathan's hunch at that time did indicate that the admirer of his secret was Scott, where we can see Jonathan hugs Donna intimately, but hugs Scott a little awkwardly. Until finally the presenter Jenny Jones stated to Jonathan that Scott was an admirer of his secret all along. Scott loves him and has an extraordinary fantasy towards Jonathan. When Jenny Jones asked again about Jonathan's fantasy, Scott said he wanted to lick ice cream, whipped cream, and strawberries on Jonathan's body. Jonathan looked blushed or embarrassed, and kept his cool throughout the show, and also stated loudly that he is a true hetero, and already considers Scott a good neighbor and friend. Despite laughing a lot, as the host seemed to keep pushing Jonathan to like Scott. As well as after the show, Donna said that the relationship between Scott and Jonathan was still good in the evening. They then drank until the morning. 3 days later, March 9, 1995, Scott made a small note on Jonathan's door, described it as a tantalizing note. But apparently this angered Jonathan, who was already engaged. He took the note Scott home, snapped at Scott about the note, then shot Scott Amador twice in the absence with a gun. Jonathan said, Scott said died instantly on the spot. Jonathan immediately called the police on 911, admitting to killing Scott and blaming the Jones Show for embarrassing him and his family. Of course. Then the Jenny Jones Show episode of this same-sex secret crush was never shown, even though the video was circulated for court purposes only. During the trial, Lawyer Jonathan Schmitz blamed the production team, for the Jenny Jones Show, for embarrassing him. The production is considered to have lied to Jonathan, by providing a gray code, about his secret admirer. Because if he knew that the secret admirer was a man, Jonathan would certainly not want to be on the show. The lawyer said Jonathan suffered from mental illness after appearing on the show. Until finally, at the trial at the end of October 1996, Jonathan Schmitz was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with a second-degree murder charge, for his efforts to protect himself and also protect his family from Knew What's Not Good. Jonathan's fear of being thought that in fact he's had a same-sex relationship with Scott. But Jonathan's 25-year sentence seems to get a lot of cuts, because on August 22, 2017, he was released, and only served 21 years in prison. While if we go back to May 1999, the Scott Amador family sued Cruz of the Jenny Jones Show for $25 million, for the death Scott's family thinks that Jenny Jones pushed Scott to speak sensual, which finally made Jonathan angry. Even think Jenny Jones and her crew are just using each participant, to make a profit without care, for the privacy of every participant, and guest star who attended the event. Finally on May 21, 1999, the court granted the demands of the Amador family, represented by lawyer Jeffrey Fieger, and awarded Scott Amador's family in the amount of $29,332,686 for the death of Scott Amador, which at that time the event was held by Telepicture and also Warner Brothers, although in the end, Warner Brothers asked for an appeal against the claim for compensation, and finally took the middle way, which was not announced to the public. What do you think? Was it really Scott Amador's fault, because he just wanted to be invited to a talk show? And mistakenly thought that Jonathan liked him too? Or do you think it's natural for Jonathan to do that, for fear of embarrassment and his family will be bullied, if the show is broadcast? And should the event party be responsible for this? You comment below. If you like this video, don't forget to click the like and share button. For those who are stopping by for the first time, or have stopped by often, but haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to first click the subscribe button, and turn on the notification, so that next time, for example, I upload the latest video, you will be the first to know. Don't forget to watch all my other videos. Keep doing good and also stay healthy. Thank you.